How did one man, armed with seeds and science, change the fate of the world's food supply? It's a story that starts with Fritz Haber, the Nobel Prize winner of 1918, a man who is both a hero and a villain. He saved billions of people from starvation, yet he was also condemned by the world as a war criminal. To really get this story, we need to go back in time, all the way to the 19th century. Back then, the Western world was completely obsessed with something they called white gold. But this wasn't gold at all. It was guano bird droppings. Now, the Incas had been using this nitrogen-rich natural fertilizer for centuries in a sustainable way. But when Europeans discovered its magical ability to supercharge crop growth, well, greed took over. Entire empires went to war just to control these guano deposits in South America. The problem was, this resource was finite, and it was being used up at an alarming rate. Things got so bad that a famous scientist, William Crookes, issued a chilling warning to the world. He predicted that humanity was on the brink of global starvation unless a new source of nitrogen could be found. Think about that for a second. The very air we breathe is 78% nitrogen. It's everywhere, but there was a huge catch. The nitrogen in the air is held together by incredibly strong chemical bonds. No one knew how to break these bonds so that plants could actually absorb the nitrogen and use it to grow. It was one of the greatest scientific challenges of the era. The person who could solve this puzzle wouldn't just be a great inventor. They would hold the key to the future of humanity. And that's where Fritz Haber re-enters our story. Haber, a brilliant German chemist, became fixated on this problem. He knew that solving it would bring him fame, fortune, and a place in history. After countless failed experiments, working under immense pressure, he finally had a breakthrough. In 1909, alongside Carl Bosch, he developed what we now call the Haber-Bosch process. This was a revolutionary method to synthesize ammonia from nitrogen and hydrogen gas using high pressure and a metal catalyst. It was, quite literally, creating fertilizer out of thin air. The impact was immediate and massive. For the first time in history, humanity was no longer dependent on limited natural resources for its food supply. The Haber-Bosch process allowed for the mass production of synthetic fertilizers, leading to an explosion in agricultural yields. Crop production doubled, then tripled. Famines that had plagued civilizations for millennia started to become a thing of the past. It's estimated that today, half of the world's food production depends on fertilizers made using this process. That means the food on your plate right now probably wouldn't exist without Fritz Haber. He had, in effect, saved billions of lives. But this is where the story takes a dark turn. When World War I broke out, Haber, a fervent German patriot, turned his genius towards warfare. He believed that science should serve the state in peace and in war. He began developing chemical weapons for the German army, pioneering the use of chlorine gas on the battlefield. This earned him the chilling title, the father of chemical warfare. The same man who found a way to sustain life on an unprecedented scale also created a new and horrific way to end it. Haber's life is a stark reminder that science is a double-edged sword. The same discovery that can feed the world can also be used to destroy it. He was a man who contained multitudes, a savior and a monster, a Nobel laureate and a war criminal. His legacy is complicated, and it forces us to ask difficult questions about the responsibility of scientists and the very nature of progress. Did you know that the air you're breathing right now, about 78% of it, is nitrogen? It's essential for life, a key building block for every plant and animal on Earth. But there's a catch. This atmospheric nitrogen is incredibly stubborn. Its atoms are locked together by one of the strongest chemical bonds in nature, making it unusable for most living things. So how does life get the nitrogen it needs? Well, nature has its own slow and steady methods. The immense energy of a lightning strike can tear nitrogen atoms apart, allowing them to combine with oxygen and fall to the earth in rain. Certain bacteria living in the soil or on the roots of plants can also fix nitrogen, converting it into a usable form. For millennia, these natural processes were enough. But by the early 20th century, humanity was facing a crisis. The global population was booming, and agriculture couldn't keep up. Traditional fertilizers like manure and guano were becoming scarce. The world was on the brink of a massive famine. Scientists knew the answer was floating all around them, in the air itself. If they could just figure out how to artificially replicate what lightning and bacteria did, they could create limitless fertilizer and feed the world. The challenge was immense, particularly in Germany. Unlike other European powers, Germany didn't have a vast colonial empire to exploit for resources like Chilean saltpeter, a natural nitrate fertilizer. The pressure was on the country's brilliant scientific minds to find a solution. The problem, as they discovered, was that the bond holding nitrogen molecules together was ridiculously strong. For years, Germany's top chemists tried and failed to break it. They tried high temperatures, but that just made the reaction reverse itself. It seemed like an impossible puzzle. The scientific community was stumped, and the clock was ticking. Into this high-stakes race stepped a man named Fritz Haber. Haber wasn't just a brilliant chemist. He was fiercely ambitious. He saw this nitrogen problem not just as a scientific challenge, but as his personal path to greatness. He decided to tackle the problem head-on, focusing on a reaction that combined nitrogen from the air with hydrogen gas to create ammonia, a key ingredient for fertilizer. His initial setup was a brute force approach, high temperatures and high pressures to force these reluctant atoms together. At first, his results were disappointing. He could only produce tiny amounts of ammonia. The problem was something chemists call equilibrium. At the high temperatures needed to get the reaction started, the newly formed ammonia would quickly break back down into nitrogen and hydrogen. It was a frustrating one step forward, one step back dance. It seemed like he had hit the same wall as everyone else. Adding insult to injury, his scientific rival, the renowned chemist Walther Nernst, publicly ridiculed Haber's efforts, declaring that his high-pressure method was commercially unviable and a waste of time. This criticism, however, didn't discourage Haber. It provoked him. Fueled by ambition and a desire to prove Nernst wrong, he doubled down. He reasoned that if high temperature was the problem, he needed something else to speed up the reaction without breaking the products apart. He began a painstaking search for a catalyst, a substance that could facilitate the reaction at lower temperatures. He also pushed the pressure in his apparatus to unprecedented levels, creating conditions so extreme that his equipment was constantly at risk of exploding. He tested countless materials, from common iron to rare, expensive metals like osmium and uranium, looking for the perfect chemical matchmaker. Then, on a summer day in July 1909, after years of relentless experimentation, it happened. Inside his small, custom-built reactor, under immense pressure and in the presence of a finely powdered osmium catalyst, the conditions were finally perfect. Nitrogen and hydrogen gases were forced together, and for the first time in history, a steady stream of liquid ammonia began to drip from the apparatus. It was just a few drops per hour, but it was a breakthrough of monumental importance. In his lab, Fritz Haber had created bread from air. He had found a way to overcome one of nature's greatest barriers, offering a glimmer of hope that humanity could finally feed itself. This discovery would change the course of the 20th century in ways no one could have imagined. This incredible invention was quickly snapped up by the German chemical giant BASF. A brilliant engineer named Karl Bosch took Haber's small-scale lab process and scaled it up into a colossal industrial operation. Imagine this: massive factories sprouting up, towering structures churning out thousands upon thousands of tons of synthetic fertilizer. This wasn't just a scientific achievement. It was a humanitarian miracle. The threat of global famine, which had loomed over humanity for centuries, was effectively solved. Food production skyrocketed. Fritz Haber was hailed as a hero, a savior of mankind. He won the Nobel Prize, received accolades from around the world, and became a respected and celebrated figure in society. He had, quite literally, saved the world from hunger. But then, in 1914, the world plunged into darkness. World War I broke out, and the course of history, along with Haber's legacy, took a sharp, horrifying turn. Driven by what can only be described as a blind and fervent patriotism, Haber signed the Manifesto of the 93, a document where prominent German intellectuals declared their unwavering support for the war. This was just the beginning of his descent. His ammonia factories, once symbols of life and nourishment, were repurposed. The same process that created life-giving fertilizer was now used to manufacture explosives and munitions. The nitrogen compounds that made crops grow were now the ingredients for shells and bombs, feeding the insatiable German war machine and prolonging the conflict. The man who gave the world bread was now supplying the tools of destruction. As the war dragged on and bogged down into the brutal, grinding stalemate of trench warfare, Haber proposed a solution that would forever stain his name. Faced with mounting casualties and no end in sight, he championed a terrifying new form of combat: chemical warfare. He dismissed the ethical and moral objections from his peers and colleagues. In his mind, poison gas was a way to break the deadlock, to force a swift victory, and ultimately save more lives by ending the war sooner. It was a twisted, chilling logic. Haber didn't just propose the idea. He became its chief architect. He personally traveled to the front lines, overseeing the development, training, and deployment of chemical weapons. He chose chlorine gas for its deadly efficiency. In April 1915, at the Second Battle of Ypres, thousands of canisters were opened, releasing a creeping, greenish-yellow cloud of death that drifted across no man's land and into the Allied trenches. The results were horrific. Soldiers were blinded, their lungs burned, and they drowned in their own fluids. The man who had once pulled bread from air was now unleashing death from air. The very same scientific genius that had promised a future free from hunger was now being used to inflict unimaginable suffering. It's a tragic story that forces us to ask difficult questions about science, morality, and the responsibility of the inventor. Can a scientist be separated from the application of their work? Haber's life is a stark example of this dual-edged sword. His invention fed the world, but it also armed it for its own destruction, turning a Nobel laureate into a figure known to many as the father of chemical warfare. The legacy of Fritz Haber is not a simple one. It's a complex and deeply troubling story that continues to resonate today. In the early 20th century, the world was on the brink of a massive food crisis. The population was exploding, but crop yields couldn't keep up. The problem was a lack of nitrogen in the soil, essential for plant growth. Scientists everywhere were racing to find a way to synthetically produce ammonia, the key ingredient for nitrogen fertilizer. The man who cracked the code was Fritz Haber. His groundbreaking Haber-Bosch process pulled nitrogen from the air and turned it into fertilizer, literally creating bread from air. This discovery has been credited with feeding half the world's population today. For this monumental achievement, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. He was a hero, a savior of humanity. But that's only half the story. When World War I erupted, Haber, a fervent German patriot, eagerly offered his scientific genius to the war effort. He believed that a swift, decisive victory could be achieved through a new, terrifying weapon, poison gas. He saw it as a more humane way to end the war quickly, minimizing overall suffering. This belief would lead him down a dark and horrifying path. On April 22, 1915, near the Belgian town of Ypres, the German army unleashed Haber's creation. A creeping, greenish-yellow cloud of chlorine gas drifted over the Allied trenches. The effect was devastating. Soldiers clutched their throats, their lungs burning as they drowned on dry land. Thousands died in unimaginable agony. The age of chemical warfare had begun, and Fritz Haber was its architect. Back home, the German High Command celebrated him as a hero. He was promoted to the rank of captain. But his victory was hollow. His wife, Clara Immerwahr, herself a brilliant chemist, was horrified. She pleaded with him, arguing that his work was a perversion of science, a descent into barbarism. Haber dismissed her concerns, completely dedicated to his patriotic duty. Just days after he returned from supervising the first successful gas attack, Clara took his life, using his own service revolver. It was a protest against the horror he had unleashed. Did this family tragedy cause Haber to reconsider? Not at all. The very next morning, he left for the Eastern Front to oversee the release of gas against Russian troops. He continued to develop even deadlier gases, like mustard gas, which caused horrific blisters and slow, painful deaths. He was convinced that his weapons would bring Germany victory. But Germany lost the war. After the armistice, Haber was branded a war criminal, though he managed to evade prosecution. He tried to help his defeated nation by attempting to extract gold from seawater to pay off war reparations, project that ultimately failed. He returned to his scientific research, seemingly trying to leave the past behind. However, the darkest irony of his life was yet to come. When the Nazis rose to power in the 1930s, Haber's world collapsed. Despite his fervent patriotism, his Nobel Prize, and his service to Germany during the war, he was a target. Why? Because he was Jewish. The very regime he had so desperately wanted to help now saw him as an enemy of the state. He was forced to watch as his Jewish colleagues were dismissed from their positions. Refusing to participate in this persecution, he resigned and fled his beloved homeland. Haber died in exile in 1934, a broken-hearted man without a country. But his tragic legacy didn't end there. A pesticide formula his institute had developed, originally intended to control insects, was modified and weaponized by the Nazis. It became known as Zyklonb. This was the gas used in the concentration camps to systematically murder millions of people, including some of Fritz Haber's own relatives. The scientist who wanted to save Germany ended up providing the tool for its most monstrous crime. Fritz Haber's life is a chilling cautionary tale. It shows us a man who could both feed the world and create weapons of mass destruction. He embodies the terrifying duality of science, its power to create and its power to destroy. His story serves as an eternal warning that science without a conscience, without a moral compass, can lead not to progress, but to catastrophe. It forces us to ask a question that remains just as relevant today. Where do we draw the line between scientific advancement and human responsibility?